But you're here tonight on this rainy night when there's not much better to do to hear about, to hear from the authors of Hut to Hut USA, a complete guide for hikers, bikers, and skiers. So Laurel Bradley and Sam Demas wrote this book. They traveled more than almost 600 miles researching the book, which presents 16 different hut systems from Alaska to New England, from the West Coast to the upper Midwest. And they'll be talking about ways that you can plan trips that go hut to hut so that you don't necessarily have to have a tent. You have a hut in between, and so you can carry less gear. So it'll be really interesting to hear about all of those kinds of options. Laurel is an avid hiker and retired art curator and has trekked hut to hut worldwide. With Sam, Sam's a retired librarian, and his website, huttohut.info, is an important repository of information about huts and hut to hut travel. They live in Northfield, and so they're zooming in from there. Welcome, Laurel and Sam.
Okay, well, I'll start just by thanking my husband, Sam, my husband and my partner. He's really the kind of big generative force between this hut project, although I will acknowledge that I was a full-fledged enthusiast by the end of it. But Sam, well, I've given him the name Hut Nut. He discovered hut to hut travel in Europe several decades ago, and ever since, it seems like that's the main thing he wants to talk about. I was fortunate to join him. We did many trips worldwide. And Sam finally, after he retired from Carleton College, where we both worked, he turned this avocation, this enthusiasm, into a serious pursuit, which resulted in the website, which Fran mentioned, hut.info, where you get trip reports like what you just had, lots of research, just it's the biggest, most complete way of learning about hut to hut worldwide and also in the US. And Sam.
All right. And after traveling to US hut systems for 3 years, getting to know the people who run them, developing my website, I knew as a librarian, it was time to write a book on the subject. So my first and best step in this direction was to woo the remarkable Laurel Bradley to join me as an equal partner in writing this book. After all, Laurel is a smart cookie, an intrepid hiker, a great writer, an ace editor, a good photographer, and a great camp cook. And she usually accompanied me on my hut trips. And she would not have wanted to miss all the hiking, biking, and skiing research trips involved in developing material for the book. So, recently retired after a career as an art historian and a museum curator, she soon came around. We had a blast researching the book for 2 years, and she was an unusually perky and productive partner on the writing, a lot of which took place during the pandemic.
Well, I'm blushing. So I'll distract myself by welcoming all of you. It's wonderful to engage with the rovers. I want to go on lots of those hikes, so stay tuned. And it's great to be with such a large group of like-minded outdoor enthusiasts. We're thrilled that Hut to Hut came out, the book. It's a fruit of 2 to 2.5 years of travel, mostly hiking and skiing. I hope too many people aren't disappointed that biking is sort of a third modality in the book, and also lots of time writing and editing. Tonight, we're going to highlight some of the book's contents by talking very broadly about huts and hut journeys. Then we're going to narrow in on US hut opportunities and sample options, and then we give you a turn. We're outlining 6 journeys of the 16, that are presented in the book, that you can make by foot, ski, or bike, spread throughout different locations in the US. And then we're going to poll you, which you members of the audience would you choose? But now, before we go any further, we're going to kind of start engaging with you, the audience. Who among you has gone on a hut-to-hut trip? and we invite you to use the chat function. Sam and I are also curious who among you, not only who has gone on a hut trip, but where you've gone. And maybe the moderator will read back some of those answers for us. So we'll get a sense, a better sense of the audience.
So Josh said he went to the San Juan Huts last year.
Right.
Cool.
Hut to Hut Light in the Porkies.
Ah,
Route de Mont Blanc in France.
Uh-huh.
Another person, Tour de Mont Blanc.
That's a famous one.
cool. Yeah, Sam has been on that. I haven't. Okay, well, maybe if we have time at the end and our storytelling inspires your stories, you can chime in and give some greater context to our hut discussion.
We got a couple more if you want to hear them.
Cool, sure.
Maraner, Hohenweg, Italy. Several 10th Mountain Division hut trip skiing. Yurt to Yurt in northern Minnesota.
Yay.
And Sweden.
Well, we're actually going to be talking about some of those systems that your audience members have engaged in. Okay, so here we are, the question, which you've now all answered. But we're going to get back to some basics before we start to build towards presenting these choices. What is a hut anyway? Well, huts take myriad forms. Here's some pictures from tree houses to shacks to shanties to matching people and doghouse pods. That was in the island of Skye in Scotland. You could call a repurposed shepherd's hut a shepherd's wagon a hut. And let's see, there's something that's hidden underneath the picture, so you can, the yurts, that's right, yurts everywhere. Huts in the USA take myriad forms, and we're going to be talking about systems that feature architect design lodges, as you see on the left, classic cabins. This one is so photogenic we had to show you. It's Mint Hut in Alaska. We have some wall tents, as in the High Sierra camps in Yosemite, and then again, yurts down on the lower right in Idaho. Oh, Sam, I can't advance. Oh, there we go. Okay. Huts are magic. Anyone who remembers as a child building forts will agree, at least we hope. Hut magic might be solitary shelter in the wilderness. But hut magic also, it can be profoundly social. The hut can be a social space, a nest to nurture existing friendships, friends groups, as you see on the left in a Mount Tahoma hut in Washington State, featuring a friends group, a girls group, is very typical, or a space to forge new human connections, sometimes under very cramped circumstances. And what you're looking at on the right is a hut on the Iceland's Laugavegur hut on a very cold, rainy afternoon where we've all stripped off our clothes and we're getting to know each other very well in the close confines of the hut. The story of huts as recreational infrastructure started with the 19th century mountaineers. Climbers, often Brits in Switzerland, would take shelter before or after summiting in primitive shepherd's huts. Walkers, hikers, trekkers soon imitated the climbers, also taking refuge in simple mountain structures on stretches of trail far above or distant from villages. By sometime in the 20th century, extensive systems of huts crisscross Europe, especially in the Alps and in Switzerland, which we dub the birthplace of huts. On the left, you see a basic stone shepherd's hut open to today's hikers, And on the right, a state-of-the-art new Monte Rosa hut, nicknamed the Ice Cube for its faceted design. This contemporary structure also features the latest in green technology. Let's see. And then there's New Zealand, hut capital of the world. The New Zealand Department of Conservation maintains almost 1,000 huts, and there are perhaps 100 more privately owned structures ready for dedicated trampers to enjoy. And now Sam is going to talk more broadly. He's going to introduce some of the great pleasures and philosophical consequences of hut to hut.
So to stimulate your thinking in this hypothetical exercise in choosing your own hut adventure, I'm going to quickly outline some of the reasons I think huts are important, and then turn to some of the overarching considerations in planning a hut trip. For me, a hut-to-hut trip is a kind of personal pilgrimage, a journey into nature in search of meaning, renewal, and connection. In a sense, long-distance human-powered travelers, hikers, bikers, skiers, are modern-day environmental pilgrims. Most are not religious pilgrims, except to the extent that nature is their spiritual touchstone. They are people seeking connection with nature and also seeking connection with like-minded folks trying to get in tune with the rhythms of nature. With 80% of Americans living in urban and suburban settings, there's a crying need to provide more opportunities for citizens of all backgrounds with access to deep nature immersion experiences. To me, one of the great potentials of hut systems in the US is that they can make this kind of experience accessible to a more diverse range of people. While only 3 to 4% of Americans are backpackers, with huts, you don't have to be a rugged backpacker or elite athlete and have lots of gear to travel for days on end. And what I love is that huts do this while also protecting the land that we are loving to death, as more and more people seek adventure and authenticity by cooking, shitting, and sleeping in the backcountry. So how do you personalize the overall arc of your trip, or the feeling tone you wish to create for your personal pilgrimage? How do you begin to select a trip appropriate to your fitness and skill level, and to the kind of experience you're trying to create? For me, this begins with considering the multi-day traverse. Obviously, we're interested in the two in the hut-to-hut travel. Rather than staying in one hut for several days and using it as a base camp, which is a perfectly good thing to do, we instead focus on hut systems designed for walkers, bikers, or skiers traveling from one hut to another. Usually we focus on systems that are 3 nights or more in duration. Why does this matter? Well, time spent immersed in the natural world is healing. A few hours in nature is relaxing. A few days, or even more so, a few weeks in nature has an even stronger physical and psychological benefit. These benefits are elaborated in a sidebar in the book, but stated very briefly, they include escape from the day-to-day, breaking free from the claustrophobic confines of daily life, and freeing yourself from screens and media. Establishing a new daily routine that's focused on a journey with a known destination. And then this form of sustained moderate exercise is like going to the gym. It's not like going to the gym, is what I mean to say. It's not a sport. You don't keep score. In essence, day after day of rhythmic exercise contributes to a sense of well-being and to a gradual retraining of neural networks, and establishing new ways of being. A hut trip is an incredibly accessible adventure for a reasonably fit person. When it's over, many people are amazed that they could do it. They've never been on such a long outdoor journey, and they frequently call it the best thing I've ever done. And finally, it can engender a sense of renewal. The first few days are taxing. Your muscles ache. Alone with your thoughts for days on end, you begin to recognize long-established ruminative patterns of thought. But soon the body begins to grow stronger and the mind begins to clear. So when you plan a hut trip, think about how you can best realize these benefits for yourself. So where to begin? Well, first, where do you want to go? Do you want to choose a close by trip here in Minnesota or in the Midwest? Or are you looking for a trip in another region of the country? What kind of terrain do you want to travel? Mountains, prairie, woodlands, by lakes? How many nights do you want to be on the trail? Many hut systems offer hiking, biking, and skiing, but some operate seasonally and specialize in specific modes of travel. You could peruse the Huts at a Glance chart in the book to determine the seasons, modes of travel, level of challenge, number of trails, distance between huts, and other key information as you begin to narrow your options. How far apart are the huts? How many days do you want to be out? Do you want to travel continuously or build in one or more rest days to relax and explore around the huts? At our age, we like to rest every third or fourth day. Do you want a self-service hut where you can carry and cook all your own food? Or would you prefer to stay in one of the rare American full-service hut systems where they provide meals and do the cleanup for you? And what level of conviviality are you looking for? And how comfortable are you sharing space and meals with your own group or also with strangers? It's a key part of the hut experience, the social dimension. And what you're doing is indulging in a somewhat radical act of co-housing for a day or a few days. You're sharing space and living communally in huts. But lest you worry about that, it tends to bring out the best in nearly everyone. And huts are actually very safe places. A key consideration in your planning might be the reservation model used by the hut system. Worldwide, by the bunk reservations are the most common model. You reserve one bunk for each person in your party, and you share the whole hut living and sleeping quarters with people you don't know. But in the US, about half of the hut systems do exclusive use rentals, where you reserve all the bunks. In other words, you reserve the whole hut for exclusive use by the people in your party. Very few hut systems have separate sleeping quarters. So in most cases, you need to be comfortable bringing your own sleeping bag and sleeping in a bunk room with others. There's a bunk room pictured on the left. There are bunk rooms in exclusive use huts and in by the bunk huts. Private rooms, such as pictured in the center, are very rare. And then with regard to toilets and showers, there really isn't much choice. Only a few hut systems in the US provide actual showers. And while there are many different types of backcountry toilets, most have pit toilets, and traditional flush toilets are very rare. That's just the way it is with rustic accommodations. Finally, your job after a day on the trail is to rest, relax, enjoy a meal, and recreate. Playing games, doing puzzles, reading, storytelling, and sometimes singing are the primary forms of recreation. Some hut systems have saunas and hot tubs, and many are near a place where you can take a dip in season. And in a few cases, there are more upscale choices, such as pisco sours at happy hour in the Torres del Paine huts in Patagonia. And finally, rest assured that the environmental impacts of huts are low. A recent study by recreation ecologist Jeffrey Marion, who incidentally got his PhD at the University of Minnesota and did his field research on the shelters of Isle Royale, he found conclusively that on a per capita basis, overnight stays in huts have far less adverse environmental impact than traditional campsites, hardened campsites, and lodges. So huts are environmental stewardship tools. They're part of the solution to the urgent challenge of how to accommodate more and more overnight stays in the backcountry without despoiling it. Now, Laurel will go into more detail on planning a hut trip.
Well, now that we've given you a broad overview and started to kind of get you in the mood and giving you some tools to plan a hut trip, we're introducing our book and the featured hut system chapters of the book, which number 16. Let's see here. Come on, advance. Okay, so as we've said, this number 16 quite a few times. Those are the dots on the map that are in red. And as Fran indicated, they're spread across up and down the West Coast, across the upper part of the United States, and Alaska. It has some great hut opportunities. Let's see, I have to figure out where I am here. So we do this, we devote entire chapters to the 16 hut systems that are in red, but the 10 additional hut systems are all packed into a bonus chapter at the end, which are systems that didn't quite fit into our criteria, either because we could not directly experience them, mostly due to COVID, and that was one of our criteria. We had to hike, bike, or ski every system in the book, or they require specialized mountaineering skills. And our book is aimed at the more generalist in the recreational arena. So US huts, as Sam alluded, are broken into two basic categories. The full service hut, which we have represented here by the Appalachian Mountain Club Lakes of the Cloud Hut. Typically, these have staff on duty. There are family style meals. There are bunks with bedding. In the case of the AMC huts, they're blankets, and they're rented by the bunk. The self-service hut, which you see represented by this beautiful cluster of state-of-the-art yurts in the American Prairie Reserve in Montana, is again embodies the self-service modality. There's no staff, but inside you're provided with everything you need to be comfortable, or just about. There's a stove, cookware and dishes, some kind of heat, and actually at the American Prairie Reserve, even air conditioning, bunks with mattresses, and outhouses or other facilities. And these tend to be rented by the bunk or exclusive use, or in some few cases, both modalities or alternate. We have an entire chapter in our book called Planning a Hut Trip. And our tips include: talk to the hut operator, pick a leader of your group before you set out to make somebody ultimately accountable, make a reservation. There are virtually no walk-in options in US hut systems. You'll find lists of what to pack, depending on season and modality, and discussion of safety procedures. Each featured hut system offers vital practical information and tips, most notably about logistics. For example, does the route begin and end at the same point? If not, is there a shuttle or car relocation service that will reunite you with your vehicle? Without proper advanced information and planning, you may end up hitchhiking, as you see Sam doing in Iceland on the right there, if you're able to see that slide on the right, because we thought there was a bus on a Sunday, but turned out there was no bus, so we hitchhiked. Anyway, we do try to provide all that information in the book. Each of the 16 chapters, it starts out with what we call the info box, and this is just an example that is one of the first chapters, the Appalachian Mountain Club Huts, and you can see the location, the distance between huts, the elevation loss and gain, difficulty, terrain, and so on and so forth. So you can really get a snapshot of what the system is all about before you start to delve in the more narrative and prose part of these chapters. Anyway, so planning a hut trip, I think now you have most of the tools and you understand what we've done in our book to assist you. We're going to get down to presenting some trial trips, if you will, by different modalities, and then you'll get to choose. So Sam is going to start with some ski options.
So more than 80% of the hut systems in the United States offer a skiing, cross-country or backcountry skiing option. For this exercise, we're highlighting two very popular self-service mountain hut systems located in the West, the Rendezvous Huts in Washington and the 10th Mountain Division in Colorado. These are among the oldest ski hut systems in the US. Both are located on US Forest Service land, and both are self-service and have well-equipped kitchens. As with most ski huts, they are set up for you to melt snow for water. And of course, they provide wood and a wood stove for heat. But before talking about the Rendezvous, the first of these, I'm going to go off script for a Minnesota audience and just promote the great little yurt-to-yurt ski system on the Gunflint Trail that was mentioned earlier, that some of you have already visited. It's called Boundary Country Trekking. It's Minnesota's only hut system so far. Give it a try if you like cross-country skiing. You could spend 2 days skiing in the BWCA during the day and staying in a cozy yurt at night. And then to top it off, you could take a class at the North House Folk School afterwards. But back to the two choices for tonight. The Rendezvous Huts are located on the eastern slopes of the North Cascade Mountains, outside of the charming village of Winthrop, Washington. This system is about a 5 to 6 hour drive from Seattle. The snow cover in this part of the Cascades is deep, powdery, and reliable. One bonus of Rendezvous Huts is that their trails are part of the Methow Valley Trails, America's largest cross-country ski trail network, with 125 miles of groomed trails. Rendezvous is the only hut system where you can travel on both cross-country and skate skis, and one of the very few where you don't need skins to climb uphill. They offer gear service, a gear haul by snow machine if you want to travel light. Rendezvous and Methow Valley Trails are labors of love, connected and supported by some lovely outdoor communities in the region. And Winthrop is a great place to spend a few days before or after a ski trip. Started in 1982, Rendezvous was one of the first Western ski hut systems. It's family owned and operated. The 5 cozy huts are only 1 to 5 miles apart. They're rented for exclusive use and are stocked with lots of games and puzzles for evening fun. The itinerary mapped in the book is 21 miles over 4 days. It's very easy itinerary, but you can plan your own itinerary at either a novice or an intermediate level. The 10th Mountain Division huts are our 10th Mountain Division huts are located on 350 miles of backcountry ski trails in the Central Rockies. The terrain of the nation's premier ski hut system is mostly rugged, high mountains with steep ups and downs. The huts are at high elevation, and you should plan to acclimatize to the altitude before doing a traverse. And most trails require intermediate to advanced ski skills to maintain control on the downhills and skins to heave yourself up the mountain trails. The book features one novice itinerary of 13 miles over 3 days and one intermediate, the Haute route, of 23 miles over 4 days. With our Flatlander ski skills, we hired a guiding service to help us on the more challenging intermediate route. There is no gear shuttle available. This system of 34 huts is actually an umbrella organization for multiple hut systems that share a common reservation system and cooperate in many ways. Located in Aspen, Breckenridge, and Leadville areas, most of the huts sleep between 12 and 14 people. They're generally about 6 to 10 miles apart, and the 10th Mountain Division staff can advise on itineraries and make reservations at all the huts. A few of the huts, like those of the Shrine Mountain Inn pictured here on the left, provide splashes of color, private rooms, and even showers, but most are more rustic. All have kitchens with everything you need for cooking and cleaning, comfortable eating and common areas, and decks with great alpine views. Which of these two hut systems would you choose?
We're going to wait till the end before you can vote, but keep that in mind, the question.
Now Laurel's going to talk about two hiking options.
One, which is close by, which some of you have already enjoyed. Okay, now first of all, as you see, I'm going to be talking about the AMC huts in New Hampshire and the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness State Park cabin system. Both of these are fabulous and feature a generous bounty of huts, 8 in the Appalachian Mountain Club system and 15 in the wilderness section of the Porkies. Organizationally, they're very different. The AMC is one of the oldest nonprofit outdoor organizations in the US. The first hut in the White Mountain chain dates to the early 20th century. The Michigan State Park System administers the Porkies cabins, many of which date to the late 1940s. Looking for a full service hut experience in the USA? Head to the White Mountains. Here we are, Sam and I, with my sister and her husband, about to set out from Joe Dodge Lodge, you see there in the background, for an 8-hut trek. We will reach Lakes of the Clouds hut on the right. You've already seen a different picture of this, situated on the slopes of Mount Washington on day 3. The AMC huts, which sleep from 36 to 92, you book by the bunk, are spaced about 7 miles apart. This 60-mile hike in mountainous terrain under 6,000 feet may not sound like much to the more ambitious hikers among you, but keep in mind that New Hampshire is called the Granite State. Rocks, boulders, you see here, the one up there, steep up and down slopes and couloirs define the trail. The joys of this traverse, you can do all 8 huts or opt for fewer, are not only embodied in the scenery, the hike itself, but also in the overnight community that forms at each hut. You're sharing not only a bunk room, sometimes the bunks are stacked 3 high, but the common areas where a crew of mostly college student staff make and serve multi-course meals and also entertain guests with educational skits like, make sure you leave a tip. Now, the Porkies, of course, are much closer to home, assuming most of us live in Minnesota, on Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It's a great joy to trek through magical old growth hardwood forest, preserved as wilderness by the state after decades of campaigning by locals and such national figures as Aldo Leopold. The park interior is laced with rivers, punctuated by abundant waterfalls. The trail and several cabins connect hikers to the shore of Mother Superior, our sublime Midwestern ocean. By contrast with the full-service, expansive social experience of the AMC huts, hiking hut to hut or cabin to cabin in the Porkies is more intimate and DIY. You see a very quiet interior there of Sam writing in his journal. These are exclusive use cabins in classic state park rustic brown style. They sleep between 2 and 8 and are situated 4 to 6 miles apart. Our featured itinerary is a little under 23 miles over 5 days. And some of the features include boats. If your cabin happens to be located on one of the internal lakes, you have both a canoe and a rowboat here. And now I want to focus on the picture on the right, and in particular the wood pile there in the background. Every hut system has its own subcultural activities. The AMC crew skits, for example. In the Porkies, it's all about gathering firewood, not only to keep ourselves warm, but to supply the next party, at least for the first night. Those who fail in this duty are duly punished by means of logbook condemnations left for all to read. Over to you, Sam, about biking.
Okay. So while most U.S. hut systems support some form of biking, the San Juan Huts in Colorado has 2 classic gravel bike routes, one starting in Telluride and the other in Durango, and both ending in Moab, Utah. Adirondack's Hamilton Huts represents a very different model, specializing in end-to-end travel in the 6 million acre Adirondack Park, which contains 101 hamlets and towns. Adirondack's Hamilton Huts doesn't have any huts. It's a community-based outfit with key involvement from local government officials and local businesses and nonprofits, and has a strong economic development agenda for the region. Adirondack Hamilton Huts customers travel by day through one of the nation's oldest mountain ranges and along its many lakes, and at night they eat in local restaurants and stay in existing lodgings. Besides not having huts, what is unique about Adirondack Hamilton Huts is that paddling trips are included in the mix of options. The staff of this new outfit are experienced guides and environmental educators. They try to accommodate customers' skills, fitness levels, and pocketbooks. And they delight in mapping out bespoke multi-day trips for hikers, bikers, skiers, and paddlers. And they even arrange the rental of bikes, including e-bikes. And finally, they set trekkers up with food and lodging along the way, in lodgings that range from cabins, taverns, motels, and Airbnbs to pricey old great camps. Guiding and gear shuttle are available. San Juan Huts is the nation's premier gravel bike system, offering the 2 epic rides I mentioned, each about 215 miles. Featured in the book is the ride from Telluride to Gateway, stopping just short of the final stretch in Moab. It runs over mountains and on stunning high mesa back roads. It's a real thrill. In addition to the gravel, it offers challenging, flowy, single track trails. The route involves about 13,000 feet of elevation gain and loss, and includes some really steep terrain. This bike system operates June to September each year. The family-operated San Juan Huts also runs a hiking and skiing hut system near Telluride. The 16 by 16-foot wood frame huts on the Telluride to Moab route are spaced about 27 to 37 miles apart. Huts are rented by the bunk, and you can rent the entire hut for your party or share the hut and meals with other rugged bikers along the way, which is what we did. San Juan Huts provides water and will stock the hut with beer for a fee. And they pioneered a food supply system popular in Norway, which we call self-service plus, meaning that they stock a pantry with a wide range of ingredients and provide a cookbook based on these ingredients. San Juan Huts is very popular and has influenced the development of other hut systems, a few of which have also adopted the self-service plus model. A new hut system based on this model, the Aquarius Trail, opened up in southwest Utah after we finished the book. So which one would you choose?
Okay, now we're going to set this up. I think we've set it up with the help of our rover friends. And so we're starting first with the skiing choice, Rendezvous Huts near Winthrop, Washington, and 10th Mountain Division in Colorado. If you could all vote, not that I know how to do this.
Laurel,
Yes.
I actually set up one poll with all
Okay.
3 questions.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just remind you of what your choices are. They're the first with the skiing systems, and next with the hiking system, the Appalachian Mountain Club huts versus the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness cabins. That's hiking. And then finally biking, the Adirondack Hamilton Huts versus the San Juan Huts in Colorado. Okay. And then finally, Fran, did you then give the kind of best of show as a separate question? What's your favorite of all? Okay.
Yeah, Stacy set that up.
Okay. So that'll be after we do these. Then you'll get an opportunity to say, well, if you can only pick one out of the 6, which one is it going to be?
So you're ready for the poll?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
People are answering it, so that's
It's
great.
already out there.
Yeah. Well, so far in the runoff between the Rendezvous and the 10th Mountain Division, it looks like Rendezvous is leading. Okay, 64 to 38. And then the hiking option, ooh, that's a little closer. The AMC has got 56 to the Porkies 44. Okay, great. And then the bike option, I don't seem to be able to see that
50.
one. 50 so far. Wow. Cool. Okay. Well, maybe when we start with questions, a few of you will weigh in on, why you answered the way you did. Okay. So shall I end this poll and then we'll move on to the next one? Is that how we do that for the next question in terms of the best overall, the favorite overall? And I actually have another slide. Okay. I have a slide here that has all 6 of them on a single slide.
It's at the bottom of the current poll.
Oh, it is. Okay. So you just have to scroll it. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing it, but, oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Okay. Oh, wow. Look at that. The overall favorite would be Adirondack Hamilton Huts. Look at that.
All right. People seem to like that model.
Yeah. They like the e-bikes. I think that's what it is now. What do you think? Well, this is, anyway, well, I hope we've given you a lot to think about and maybe even inspired you to look more deeply into some of these options, or perhaps you're like, well, I want to learn about the other 10 hut systems. Well, I guess you'll have to ask us some great questions or peruse the book for that. But in the meantime, we're looking forward to your questions. Which I think, shall we do, we're doing that through the chat, or are you just gonna raise your hands and do it as a self-selected thing? Anyway, we'll rely on the.
Either or. Either or.
We'll rely on our host to sort of navigate that for us.
Yeah.
So we have some questions about the book. Is the book available at any local bookstores?
It's available in a lot of bookstores. It's in most REIs and most sporting, certainly sporting good related bookstores. But
if you ask for it, if they don't have it, ask for it and tell them that if they order it, they'll sell it. Well, of course, we live in Northfield, in our local bookstore. When we told them about the book, we got a kind of underwhelming response from the owner. But the first 3 they ordered sold out to a single person. And then every time we would go in from then on, she was like, I can't believe how well your book is selling. So, go figure. But you can also order it directly from the Mountaineers, which is the publisher in Seattle, or from Amazon.
Say, Laurel,
Yes.
there's a question here, whether you might do a presentation at a Twin Cities bookstore so that we could get an autographed copy.
We would love it. We did actually Midwest Mountaineering in the Fall Expo. And so just if you have connections with the bookstore, a bookstore in the cities, please help us set that up.
Are you not going to be at the spring Midwest Mountaineering Expo?
I think we're not. We're going to be in Greece, I think.
we were there. We were at the fall one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cheap excuse, Greece. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
There's like a few huts in Greece, just so you know.
Does anyone else have any questions?
What was your favorite of the ones you proposed here? What was your favorite?
Well, I have a number of favorites, but I really like the Porcupines, and I highly recommend a trip there. It's
Although some people have done it.
yeah, some of you have done it, but I bet most of you haven't. And the amazing thing about it is that it's in a wilderness area, and having human-built structures in a wilderness area is against the law.
Federal law.
The federal law. So this is a state wilderness area. And environmentalists in Michigan tried very hard to get these cabins torn down. But they were so popular with so many people that there was a very strong lobby to grandfather them in. And so you have an opportunity to walk through a virgin wilderness. They never cut the timber. This is the last and largest remaining large block of northern hardwoods forest that's left in the country. It used to cover a third of the country. And now you can go and hike hut to hut, cabin to cabin in the Porkies. And you've heard of the term forest bathing, where the benefits of the phytochemicals as you're walking through the wilderness. This is forest bathing at its peak. The smells, the sounds, the sights are just staggering. And then you've got, Lake Superior right there.
So I just want to add something about reservations. The Porkies is not, I could tell from the logbooks that people do go there and hike hut to hut, they'll stay and then they'll go from one to another. I don't think many of you, when you heard the term hut to hut, you were probably thinking of Mont Blanc in France rather than the Porcupines in Michigan. But we defined hut to hut hiking as any system that supported 3 or more days of continuous hiking with a structure that you could spend the night at. But in order to string them together, sometimes you have to work with the reservations people. And then more broadly, in terms of getting reservations, it was pretty extraordinary for us to learn how popular these hut systems are. Even though they don't spend a single dime on marketing, they're well known primarily to their local users. So for example, the Rendezvous Huts in Winthrop, Washington, they are known in the state of Washington in the Pacific Northwest. And so we, even though we're writing a book, which is like, hey, pretty good publicity for the owner, and he was willing to let us stay for free, there were no weekends free. It was just not available. We did manage to do it. But that's just something to keep in mind. You have to be kind of persistent. You might look way ahead when you're booking, and talk to the reservations people, because they obviously are in the best position to help you.
And just as a matter of interest, the reason we were able to do it was that he told a Canadian family that had booked one of the exclusive use huts at Rendezvous about us. And they said, well, they could stay with us. So we piggybacked on their exclusive use reservation, and we had a wonderful time spending in the evening with them, getting to know them. And they volunteer for a volunteer hut system in British Columbia. So that was a really neat experience.
I noticed on the one slide they had the matching dog house and a cabin. So I'm wondering, what's your experience with running into animals? We have a shepherd we'd love to bring if we could. Have you made inquiries or know anything about that?
Well, we do mention that in each featured hut system, whether pets are allowed. Very few actually allow pets. But for example, in the Rendezvous Huts, there's one of the 5 huts that they allow dogs. And the reason has mostly to do with the landlord, so to speak, the Forest Service, whether the landlord allows it. And the other reason that many do not allow animals, dogs in particular, is that in the winter, these huts rely on snow melt for water. And so once you have a pet that's peeing in the area around, then you're compromising potentially the health of the people staying there. But there are a few, so you have to read that part of the information.
Cool, thank you.
Figure that out.
So Laurel, there are a couple questions in the chat here. One of them was cost, or how affordable is this? And then the other person was asking about backpacks. What backpacks have worked?
Well, the least expensive hut system in the United States is the Mount Tahoma Trails Association in near Mount Rainier in Washington. It's volunteer operated. It's $15 a night per person by the
per bed.
And they're really nice huts and yurts. The most expensive is probably the Appalachian Mountain Club, which tends to run somewhere between $100 and $125 a night. But that includes breakfast and dinner.
And then but also the High Sierra camps in Yosemite,
right,
which they keep canceling, and it's really impossible to get a reservation, but those are more like 160 a night.
Yeah, that's the
like
most
that.
expensive.
So partly it depends when you're renting an exclusive use hut. Let's say it's $120 a night for the hut. Depends on how many people are in your party in terms of how you're going to amortize those costs. So we would say it ranges from 15 to 50, more or less. And then the full service huts are more.
Yeah. The Appalachian or the 10th Mountain Division huts are about $35 a night.
Yeah.
Very hard to get reservations there.
Well, especially on weekends.
Yeah.
So.
And then
backpacks.
on backpacks, generally speaking, about a 35 liter backpack, 40 liters is plenty. People tend to carry somewhere between 20 and 25 pounds. You can get by with less if you're an ultralight type, but with a 40 liter pack and 22 pounds, you can be very comfortable. And there's a pretty extensive section in the book that talks about what to bring on a hike, bike, or ski trip, and what's sort of essential gear and what's optional.
And if you're in the winter time and you're in a high mountain environment like the 10th Mountain Division, and say you're going on a 4-night trip, then you're going to need to take a probe and a shovel and emergency shelter. So that's going to add some weight. But on the other hand, if you're in a hut system that has very gentle trails, that's close to town, like the Rendezvous, and has a gear shuttle, you could just carry 5 pounds.
Yeah.
There's some other questions. Mushrooms.
Oh, mushrooms at the Porkies.
Yeah.
Yes, they sure are.
Beautiful.
Amazing. And the birds, the diversity of birds and newts and reptiles in general. It's pretty amazing. And I think that the Porkies should the Rovers should organize a trip to the Porkies. They may have already.
I've done up until the pandemic, I had been doing an annual ski trip in the Porkies and found out about the hut to hut, and they have a yurt there now too, right on the lake. And I learned about that a couple years ago, and I was thinking about it, but haven't done it yet.
They have 21 accommodations in the Porkies, and 15 of them are in the designated wilderness area. And that's sort of the primo.
Here's a question about trails. How well defined are the trails between huts? Well, we have 16 systems. Most of them, and that would range from the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska to the basically the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire, and all sorts of places in between. There are a few of the winter systems where navigation can be challenging. That's why it's a good idea to be, up your skills with the map and not to rely completely on your phone, because it could freeze up or even run out of batteries. We have had experiences where we lost the trail and we had to go back to the road, and so you especially in the winter, it's good to pick a system where you feel comfortable with the kind of challenges of wayfinding. Some are much like the Rendezvous Huts. You're never, ever, ever going to get lost there. Maybe the 10th Mountain Division huts, we hired guides.
10th Mountain Division, they do not put trail markers up. It's mostly in wilderness area.
Yeah.
And so you have to rely on the trails are not groomed. So wayfinding is, can be significant, particularly in the intermediate and advanced trails.
But we did, in the book, it was Sam's job, and he did a fabulous job. There are maps and there are turn-by-turn directions that should be helpful.
And then there's a question about the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail, is 2,100 miles, and it has about 260, I think, shelters along the way. Now, a shelter is different from what we're studying, which is huts, which are enclosed structures. And there are 8 enclosed structures, huts, on the Appalachian Trail, and that's the Appalachian Mountain Club huts in the White Mountains that Laurel described.
Yeah. So if you want to do huts, and when we were doing the AMC huts, it was wonderful because we encountered lots of thru hikers, and some of them would just spring for the comfort of a hut, so they didn't have to sleep in their tent that particular night. Also, they had a special provision where if you're a thru hiker, and you did a few chores and there was room, they would let you sleep under the dining room table, that kind of thing. So we did have quite a bit of interaction. Also, the Maine Hudson Trails, which is in sort of central western Maine, that also overlaps with the intersects with the Appalachian Trail.
Very briefly,
And
yes.
those are beautiful huts. And that is a hut system that is not over reserved and overused. Actually, we would encourage people to go there because they may have over invested in these just beautiful architect designed lodges, and they had to build their entire trail system themselves. So that was a huge investment, and it's in a fairly impoverished part of Maine. It hadn't really caught on with people with lots of money. So you can have a great experience there. It's both skiing and hiking, with a little canoeing thrown in. But those are really the fanciest lodges that you encounter of any of the systems in our book.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. One is about gravel biking at San Juan. It is it mountain biking and or gravel bike? Well, it's both. You can do the whole thing on gravel roads, and people tend to, I guess there are specialized bikes for gravel roads, and then there are specialized bikes for the single track.
Which you rented a mountain
And
bike,
I
right?
rented a mountain bike that works for both, more of a hybrid. And the single tracks, I'm not that experienced a biker, so I only did a few of the sections of single track, and they were really cool, but they were at the edge of my capabilities. I didn't feel totally safe, so I went really slow. But people who do a lot of that kind of backcountry riding really and then there's another question that says that it asks about huts trips elsewhere in the world. What is our favorite? And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
We
But
spent 3 months in New Zealand hiking hut to hut, and we didn't stand anywhere near. We
stayed in 50 huts,
and there's 961 something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yes, you did.
And then in Chile, in Patagonia, in the Torres del Paine, that's a beautiful, beautiful area. The landscape is beautiful. The huts, one of the huts is like kind of big. It's sort of like a big hostel, not that great, but a few of the other huts on that trek called the W are very wonderful.
I would just like to add to the New Zealand thing. Everybody knows about the Great Walks, and they're up to either 11 or 12 now, and they are great. But there are hundreds of other really cool hut trips that you can take. And if anybody wants to go to New Zealand, you can first try the Department of Conservation website. But there's some really good books on the subject, and we'd be happy to recommend. It is the capital of huts in the world. It's a fabulous system. The people are friendly. The buildings are well maintained. It's safe. The trails are well marked. The landscape is spectacular.
And one thing you could, if you're really adventurous, whether you've been there or not, you can volunteer as a hut warden, which is what we did. And so you go to the Department of Conservation website, or where you look for volunteer gigs, or you go to the individual national park. So we were volunteers in Nelson Lakes National Park, which is on the north end of the South Island. And it just happened they had availability. So, and usually that means you stay in a single hut and you clean the bathrooms and you give a little talk and you check passes. That's basically what you do. But we were given a circuit. And so every night every day we would hike to a different hut, and we would then have to, move into our little hut master quarters and cook our dinner in between checking people in and giving a little hut talk. And then in the morning, of course, cleaning the toilets before we moved on to the next hut.
Right. Another country that I would highly recommend is Slovenia in the Julian Alps. They have many huts, and they're connected through a variety of trails, quite a trail system. English is very widely spoken. The landscape is fabulous. It's sort of like Switzerland,
Much cheaper.
but much cheaper, and without all the pretense and people. So that's a really good one. Iceland has some great hut to hut. The Fimmvörðuháls in the Northeast is a real gem.
Anyway, we could go on.
Yeah, there's a whole section in the book, a chapter about international huts. It's not comprehensive, but it gives you a good idea.
And hopefully your organizers there, maybe you can make our email addresses available, and so we could answer some individual questions if that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can absolutely send your email address out. Yep. Are there any other questions for Laurel and Sam? If not, then I guess we can break out into the breakout sessions. We'll do that for about 10 minutes. Oh, we have another question here.
Yeah, about
Which
solo.
trails are safest for solo women?
Solo women. So if you're a solo hiker, well, again, the Rendezvous and the Mount Tahoma, those two in Washington State, just because there's a lot of people around and the distances aren't great. There's not a chance of getting lost or injured, that kind of thing.
I would
Where
say
else would you say?
the AMC huts, because there tend to be
There's
a
lots
lot
of people around.
and
Yeah.
The 10th Mountain Division huts. I
Not
think-
so much,
Yeah.
unless you're inexperienced.
Yeah, you have to be really
You have to be an
experienced.
experienced kind of backcountry winter person. And I think the Yosemite, if you could get reservations, good luck with that. Would be, that there's, we say there's lots of people, but we have not experienced any crowding or anything. It's just you meet people, one group an hour, that kind of thing, and you have nice little conversations. I don't know. I'm sorry, we haven't really thought about that question much. Well, a place where there's nobody, so it must be safe, is the American Prairie Reserve. So that's a really amazing kind of experimental land. What do they call it? They call it a land trust. It's a land trust in north central Montana on the Missouri River, where this not-for-profit raises lots of money every year to buy properties, mostly ranches, that are in between large stretches of federal land, with the goal of hopefully reconstituting, 3 million acres of prairie, so that there's a hope that it could be restored to the conditions that Lewis and Clark found it in.
So it's a bioregional scale conservation project that was actually initiated by the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah, and now they have 3 huts. You can hike. They aren't really officially set up to go hut to hut. They're about 7 miles apart. There are, but we did hike them, and it was a great experience. But there's nobody out there because it's hard to get to.
Is there anything around Glacier at all? Glacier?
No, not in that region. Glacier has, what's it called, that chalet?
Yeah, they have some chalets you can hike to. Yeah.
That was originally, there were several chalets and they would go horseback riding chalet to chalet, but now there's just the one left.
Well, I think the closest, and it's not anywhere near, is in Idaho, Pocatello. I guess that's Wyoming. That's pretty far from Glacier, but there's a yurt system that's run by Idaho State University It's a winter system that you can ski yurt to yurt in the mountains near Pocatello.
Right. And this is not answering your question, but there are about 8 or 10 hut systems that are in various stages of development. And so the map is changing all the time. As I mentioned, there was a new one opened up in Southwest Utah just last year. So huts are a very scarce commodity. The demand is much greater than the supply. And my prediction is that not in my lifetime, but that there will be a fabulous hut system along the Superior hiking trail in the future. It's a perfect location for a hut system.
Okay. Well, it's
I was
been-
all thinking now, Sam. Yep.
I think the Superior Hiking Trail Association does a fabulous job, but I think they're a little conservative. I mean, they have a hard job just taking care of what they got, much less thinking about something as big as a hut system. But they're sitting on top of the perfect location. Enough said.
Well, it's been lovely spending so much of the evening with all of you, and we're very inspired. We do live in Northfield, but it looks like it will only cost us $10 to join the Rovers since we're outstate in Rice County.
We would we'd love to have you. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, thanks so much for the presentation. It was great.
You could even lead group tours.
There you go.
I guess so, yeah.
That was fun. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
All righty.
Good night.
Bye.